When Jungkook's mysterious surprise unfolds in a shadowy American alley, Taehyung's reaction is anything but expected. Was it betrayal or protection? Rain hammered the asphalt like bullets as Jungkook crashed through the back door of the neon-lit bar, blood trickling down his temple and a torn envelope clutched in his shaking fist. He led her in the rain. He didn't hear the gunshot. He only felt the aftershock of it, metal-splitting silence, his ears ringing as he stumbled onto the wet street. Sirens wailed in the distance, dissonant and far too late. Steam coiled from the city grates. A cab swerved and screeched past him, horn blaring. But Jungkook wasn't running from traffic, he was running from the truth that had just detonated his world. A few moments earlier, inside the velvet shadows of Club Lyra in downtown Chicago, he had opened the letter. It wasn't addressed to him. It had been slipped under his hotel room door. No name, no return address, just a wax seal pressed into the shape of an unfamiliar crest. 2 tigers circling a single black star. The letter read, "Your bloodline is not who you think it is. Meet me behind the Lyra at 11:07 p.m. Come alone. This is bigger than music." That was all. Yet every syllable sank like lead into his gut. He had come alone, slipping out of the back door unnoticed, as instructed. But the alley wasn't empty. A figure had been waiting, a woman with a raven tattoo stretching from her collarbone to her jaw. She handed him a flash drive. She didn't speak. He didn't ask. But before he could even tuck it into his coat, the shot rang out. It missed her by inches. She vanished into the fog before he could even say, "Why me?" And now, here he was, dripping with sweat and rain and adrenaline, staring at the blinking open sign of a 24-hour laundromat. He ducked inside. The fluorescent lights buzzed like insects. A man in a hoodie looked up from folding towels. Jungkook kept walking, heart slamming in his chest. He didn't know what was on the drive, but he knew who to call. Taehyung. Half a world away, Taehyung was watching the sunrise from his penthouse in Seoul. Jazz music spilled softly from the speakers. He was sketching again, a habit he had only picked up after the Tokyo hiatus. Long fingers smudged charcoal over thick paper. His phone buzzed once. Then again, when he saw Jungkook's name, he didn't hesitate. "Cook?" Taehyung's voice was low, alert. "What's wrong?" There was silence for 3 seconds too long. Then came the whisper. "Hyung, they tried to kill me. I think it's connected to my family. I need to know who I really am." Taehyung didn't flinch. He stood up slowly, the morning light washing over his sculpted features. "Where are you?" he asked. "Chicago." Another pause. A flicker of something unreadable passed over Taehyung's face. Nostalgia? Regret? Something else? "Don't talk to anyone," Taehyung said, voice like stone. "I'll handle it." He hung up before Jungkook could respond. Then, without a word, Taehyung opened a locked drawer in his desk, pulled out a leather folder labeled Sins of the Father, and lit a cigarette, something he hadn't done in years. Inside the folder were photos, not of Jungkook, but of a man who looked exactly like him, dated 1998. The man stood next to someone wearing the same tiger star crest. Taehyung stared at the folder for a moment too long, then whispered to no one, "I warned them not to drag him into this." Thus began a chain of events that would unravel not only the hidden history behind Jungkook's lineage, but also secrets Taehyung had buried beneath charm, music, and million-dollar smiles. Their journey would crisscross America's underbelly, haunted by codes, betrayals, and a secret society operating beneath the entertainment industry. The question wasn't who Jungkook was anymore. It was what Taehyung had done to keep the truth hidden, and why someone wanted it exposed now. The rain had stopped, but Jungkook was still soaked through. The laundromat smelled like detergent and tired neon, its buzz more irritating now that his ears had stopped ringing. He sat in the corner near a broken vending machine, the flash drive in his palm trembling like a second heartbeat. The adrenaline hadn't faded, only mutated into something colder, heavier, an anxious weight at the base of his spine. No one followed him, at least not that he could tell, but paranoia crept into every creak and shuffle. He checked his phone again. One message from Taehyung. "Stay low. I'll be there by morning." No emoji, no sign-off. Jungkook stared at the text like it was a lifeline he couldn't quite grab onto. This wasn't just a bad encounter or a misunderstood fan moment, it was deliberate. Someone had planned this. Someone had chosen Chicago, chosen him. He glanced out the window. The wet street reflected the ghost of a city that never really slept, only turned away and mumbled in its dreams. He pressed the flash drive into his pocket, then reached into his coat's inner lining, pulling out a compact travel laptop. He shouldn't open it, not alone. But every second wasted was a second he wasn't in control, and that was beginning to scare him more than the bullet. He booted the device. No Wi-Fi, no Bluetooth. Isolated and paranoid, that's how Taehyung had taught him to be with sensitive material. He smiled faintly at the thought. Taehyung had always been the one with secrets, the one who kept knives beneath silk. The flash drive clicked into place with a muted snap. A single folder appeared on the screen. From the vault. No password required. Either the woman in the alley had known he'd find it immediately, or this was a trap. He hesitated, fingers hovering above the trackpad. He clicked. Inside were 4 files. A video named Exhibit A, Sol 1998. A document labeled Birth Certificate, JJK, redacted. An image file, blurry and time-stamped. A second video, encrypted, named The Blood Archive. Jungkook opened the image first. It was low-res, clearly scanned from something physical. A man stood with his back turned to the camera, near a long black car. He wore a coat with a tiger star crest emblazoned in white thread. Next to him stood a woman, her face shadowed, but her posture stiff, formal, like a soldier or a bodyguard. And in her arms was a baby. Jungkook's eyes narrowed. The baby's left ear had a small mole barely visible, but he knew it. He had it. He'd hated it as a child, tried to cover it during shoots, even though no one noticed but himself. His chest tightened. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't some deep fake. He opened the birth certificate next. Most of it was blacked out, but 3 things were clear. His date of birth, a Seoul hospital he had never visited, and a mother's name he didn't recognize. No father listed. The sound of a door creaking pulled his attention back to the laundromat. The man folding towels was gone. Jungkook stood slowly, screen still glowing. He unplugged the drive, shut the laptop, stuffed it back into his coat, and walked out, back into the dark, quiet city. 3 blocks away, a black SUV was parked beneath a flickering streetlight. The glass was tinted, but Jungkook caught the faint blue glow of a phone screen inside. A figure leaned forward as if watching, waiting. He didn't wait to find out who it was. He ran. Down side streets, alleys with cracked murals and rusted fire escapes. The city blurred, his lungs burned. He only stopped when he reached the elevated train tracks, slipping behind one of the concrete columns. Only then did he allow himself to breathe. That's where Taehyung found him the next morning. The sky had just started to soften into blue. Jungkook sat beneath the tracks, knees drawn up, hoodie pulled low. He looked up when a shadow crossed over him. Taehyung stood with a cigarette tucked behind his ear and his coat open, exposing the soft cashmere turtleneck he always wore when he needed to feel like he was in control. He didn't speak, just looked. Jungkook didn't get up. "I opened the drive," he said finally. "I know." Taehyung sat beside him. He didn't look cold, despite the bite in the wind. Jungkook turned toward him. "Why didn't you tell me?" Taehyung's jaw clenched. "Because you were happy not knowing." "That's not fair." "No, it's not," Taehyung said softly. "But fair hasn't been part of this for a long time." Jungkook pulled the flash drive from his pocket and placed it between them. "She said it's bigger than music." "She's right," Taehyung answered. "I don't even know who I am anymore." "You do," Taehyung said. "But there's a version of your life they tried to erase, and now it's resurfacing. Who are they?" Taehyung lit the cigarette, took a long drag, exhaled like it hurt. "Your biological father was a diplomat, but that was a cover. He worked with a private intelligence syndicate called the Meridian Ring. When he tried to defect with evidence of what they were really doing, he vanished. Your mother disappeared 2 weeks later. You were placed into an anonymous adoption process. I didn't find out until I joined the music program at the foundation." Jungkook stared at him, cold crawling up his spine. "You're saying my entire childhood? Manufactured, not fake," Taehyung added quickly. "But redirected. You were placed with people meant to keep you safe. Or at least, keep you out of the wrong hands." Jungkook ran a hand through his hair, fingers trembling. "You've known all this? For years?" And you didn't tell me. Taehyung looked away. I wanted to, but once I knew what they were capable of— Who's they, Taehyung? Stop hiding behind riddles. Taehyung's voice dropped, like the name itself could summon danger. The Black Vault. Jungkook blinked. That sounds like a comic book villain. It's not. It's a deep ops archive hidden by intelligence operatives across several countries. It's said to contain everything the world governments erased, failed experiments, blackmail, identities they didn't want traced. And my family's part of that? Your father tried to expose them. That makes you a threat by bloodline. Jungkook laughed, bitter and sharp. So I'm not a singer anymore. I'm a living classified file? Taehyung looked at him then, eyes softening with something close to guilt. Or maybe grief. You're still Jungkook. But the world might stop seeing you that way after this. They sat in silence. The train roared overhead, loud and final. Jungkook looked down at the flash drive again. There's an encrypted video. I didn't open it. Good, Taehyung said. It's not for you. Jungkook's head snapped up. What? It's addressed to me, Taehyung said. It's my voice in that file. A message I recorded 4 years ago, in case this day ever came. Jungkook didn't move. Why would you record something for me before I even knew anything? Because I knew it would come to this, Taehyung said. And I knew you'd hate me when it did. Jungkook said nothing. Taehyung reached over, took the drive, and held it like something sacred. Then he stood. We're going to New York, he said. Why? Because the last person who saw your father alive is waiting for us. Jungkook rose slowly. And you think we can trust them? No, Taehyung said, pocketing the drive. But I think we're out of time. The two of them walked away from the tracks, the city behind them already starting to wake. But something in the air had shifted. Not just between them, between who they had been and who they were now forced to become. Neither of them knew what the Black Vault would reveal, but it was too late to go back. And neither of them wanted to. The snow was just beginning to fall as the train pulled into Grand Central, its arrival unnoticed among the endless flow of tired commuters, wide-eyed tourists, and the invisible ghosts of a city that had long forgotten how to sleep. New York welcomed them not with fanfare, but with noise and indifference, the kind that could suffocate or liberate depending on how well you knew how to disappear. Jungkook stepped off the platform behind Taehyung, his hood up, face half hidden beneath a plain black mask. Nobody recognized him. Not yet. But the anonymity didn't comfort him. If anything, it unsettled him more. Fame had become a kind of armor, and now it was stripped away, leaving him exposed in ways that had nothing to do with paparazzi or fans. Taehyung walked like he always did, with elegance that bordered on arrogance. Every step measured, every glance calculating. But this version of him was different. He didn't smile. He didn't perform. This wasn't the stage persona, the charming mystery the world loved. This was someone stripped of pretense, walking towards something he had tried to outrun for years. The car that picked them up was black, unmarked. The driver said nothing, just nodded at Taehyung, opened the door, and took them through streets slick with ice and neon reflection. Jungkook stared out the window in silence, watching as the city changed block by block, like a living organism with 1,000 contradictory faces. Every once in a while, Taehyung would glance at his phone, typing short, encrypted messages in an app Jungkook didn't recognize. They arrived in a quiet part of Brooklyn, where the buildings were older, the paint peeled, and the sidewalks cracked with memory. The safe house wasn't labeled, just a narrow brownstone with blackout curtains and no name on the buzzer. Taehyung keyed in a code. The door opened. Inside, the air was dry and sterile. The walls were lined with acoustic foam and shelves stacked with hard drives and dusty file boxes. It smelled of paper, ink, and old electricity. The room was lit only by the glow of a single desk lamp, casting long shadows across the floor. A man stood in the center of the room. He was tall, wiry, and had the look of someone who hadn't slept in days but didn't care. His gray hair was pulled back into a small knot. A long scar cut through his right eyebrow, stopping just short of his eye. He didn't speak when they entered, just nodded once at Taehyung, then turned his gaze to Jungkook. "So this is the ghost," he said, his voice graveled and dry, like wind scraping a canyon wall. Jungkook stiffened. "Excuse me?" The man stepped closer, You're not supposed to exist, kid. And yet here you are. Who are you? Jungkook asked. Name's Elias. I was your father's handler, until he tried to burn everything down. Taehyung stepped between them slightly, not protectively, but deliberately, like a subtle warning. We didn't come for your judgment, he said. Just the footage. Elias laughed, bitter and short. It's not about judgment. It's about understanding what you're walking into. He turned to a large locked cabinet in the corner of the room. With shaking fingers, he typed in a long string of digits. The safe clicked open. From inside, he pulled a hard drive the size of a book. Black. Unmarked. He handed it to Taehyung. Everything your father left behind is on that drive. Names, coordinates, identities, buried secrets from half the intelligence agencies on this side of the planet. Why give it to us now? Jungkook asked. Elias looked at him, expression unreadable. Because your father made one request before he vanished. If his son ever came looking, give him the truth, no matter the cost. Jungkook's breath hitched. So he's alive? Elias looked away. No one who crosses the vault stays alive, but there were anomalies. People who disappeared in ways that don't match the pattern. Your father might be one of them, but if he is, he's buried deeper than any of us can dig. Taehyung clutched the drive. Is the Black Vault tracking us? They're always watching, Elias said. But they don't know where you are. Not yet. I've scrambled this location for 48 hours. After that, you're on your own. Jungkook felt the walls closing in. His mind raced. 1,000 questions clawed at the surface, but only one escaped. What did my father do that made them want to erase him? Elias's eyes darkened. He discovered Project Siren. Neither Taehyung nor Jungkook moved. Elias continued. The Vault's most protected operation. A genetic memory experiment. Splicing traumatic legacy data into the offspring of key operatives. You weren't just adopted, Jungkook. You were designed. The words hit him like glass to the face. I don't believe you. You don't have to. The truth doesn't need your permission. Jungkook took a step back. That's insane. You're telling me my nightmares. The flashes I get. The stuff that doesn't make sense. That's implanted? Not implanted. Inherited, Elias said, through a process they developed during the last war. Memories encoded into cellular structure. Your father tried to expose it. He found evidence that they'd used children, dozens of them, as test subjects. Taehyung's grip on the hard drive tightened. His knuckles turned white. We need to go, he said. Elias didn't stop them. He just nodded once, then sat down at his desk, lighting a cigarette with hands that trembled, as if remembering things too horrible to forget. The car was already waiting when they left. Inside, Jungkook didn't speak. He stared at the floor, eyes wide but unfocused, mind unraveling like film from a burning reel. Taehyung didn't push him. Back at the hotel, they sealed the doors, drew the blackout curtains, and hooked the drive to the secure terminal Taehyung had brought. The screen lit up with encrypted files, layers upon layers of firewalls, but Taehyung knew how to navigate them like a surgeon. One folder was labeled simply JJK, Core. Jungkook hovered over it. His fingers were ice. Do I open it? Taehyung didn't answer immediately. Then he said, quietly, only if you're ready to stop being who you thought you were. Jungkook clicked. Inside were video files, some surveillance, some personal. One was labeled Final Message. He opened it. The screen filled with static, then resolved into an image. A man, face gaunt but familiar, eyes like his. A voice that shook him. If you're seeing this, it means they found you. It means I failed to keep you hidden. Jungkook's knees gave out. He sank to the floor, eyes locked on the screen. I'm sorry, son, the man said. They used you. They used me. But you can stop them. Inside the vault is a list, a master ledger of everyone involved. Expose it. Bury me if you have to. But don't let them do to others what they did to us. The video cut to black. Jungkook sat there for a long time. When he finally looked up, his eyes had changed. The innocence was gone. Not broken, just replaced. Rewired. We have to burn it down, he said. Taehyung nodded. Then we do it together. Outside, snow began to fall again. But this time, it didn't feel like winter. It felt like a countdown. The air inside the hotel room felt thinner, more fragile, like the walls themselves knew secrets were being spoken that could shatter everything. Taehyung sat motionless at the small desk, the glow from the monitor painting sharp shadows across his face. Jungkook remained on the floor, staring at the now dark screen where his father's voice had just flickered and died, like a flame suffocated too soon. Neither of them spoke for a long time. When Jungkook finally did, his voice was hollow but steady. "We leaked the files." Taehyung didn't look at him right away. Instead, he reached slowly for a flash drive silver, shielded in polished steel and engraved with the name Icarus, a name that meant everything and nothing at once. "Not yet," he said softly. "We don't even know what's in the rest of this data. We need to verify it, trace it, make sure we don't bring hell down on the wrong heads." Jungkook stood, his limbs stiff, his chest tight with the weight of inheritance he never asked for. "You're afraid?" "No," Taehyung replied, standing too. "I'm aware. There's a difference." They locked eyes, and for a moment, the tension between them wasn't just about the mission or the truth, it was about the years they'd spent orbiting each other, never quite touching the full gravity of their connection. Taehyung broke it first, looking away, exhaling deeply through his nose. "I contacted someone," he said. "An old source who used to work deep inside Meridian. She's been off the grid since Vienna, but if anyone can help us understand this mess, it's her." Jungkook nodded, though the motion felt like surrender. "When do we meet her?" "She only agreed to one condition," Taehyung said, moving to the wardrobe and pulling out a small case. Inside was a simple but elegant disguise. A dark, custom-tailored suit and mask ensemble used in certain elite underground gatherings where identity meant death or power, depending on how well you hid it. "She wants to meet at the Veil." Jungkook stiffened. He had heard of the Veil. Everyone in the inner entertainment circles had, though it was always brushed off as a myth, a gathering for the ultra-powerful, the obscenely wealthy, and the dangerously curious. Invitations came encrypted, buried in code, handed off in dead drops like Cold War contraband. No cameras, no phones, no aliases allowed. Just masks, rituals, and silence. "You're serious?" he whispered. Taehyung's expression didn't change. "She'll only talk there. She says the place has protections. No one can be traced, recorded, or followed. Not even the vault." Jungkook didn't ask how Taehyung had managed to secure them entry. He didn't want to know. Some things were better left unexplained. They dressed in silence, preparing not just for a meeting, but for a performance that could very well become a trap. Taehyung adjusted Jungkook's collar with care, pausing a second too long as his fingers lingered on the lapel. The contact grounded them both. "She'll know you by your eyes," Taehyung murmured. "Don't let them lie." Jungkook nodded, and together they stepped into the elevator that would take them to the car waiting in the garage below. Neither of them looked back. The Veil was housed inside a converted cathedral in Lower Manhattan, where stained glass had been replaced with opaque obsidian, and the cross above the archway had been removed, leaving behind a void like a missing tooth in the city's grin. Guards in tailored suits scanned each guest with unblinking precision, and when Jungkook and Taehyung arrived, their names weren't asked for. Their masks were enough. Inside, the air was laced with incense and secrets. People moved like shadows, sipping gold-rimmed glasses of amber liquid, whispering in corners, bartering not with money, but with information. A violinist played in the loft, the sound eerie and dissonant, like the ghost of a melody long forgotten. Taehyung led them through the crowd, nodding only once to a man in a crimson mask, who returned the gesture with a subtle tilt of the head. Every move here was a language, every silence, a sentence. They found her in one of the private cloisters, seated on a velvet bench beneath a shattered mosaic of what once might have been an angel. She wore no mask. Her face was sharp, angular, beautiful, in a way that made your chest ache. But her eyes, pale, green, and cold, were what held Jungkook in place. She was maybe in her mid-40s, but moved like someone far older, as if time hadn't dared take her but regret had. "I knew you'd come," she said, her voice low and metallic. Taehyung inclined his head. "Hello, Serafina," she smirked. "Still dramatic, aren't you?" "Aitre." Her eyes slid to Jungkook. "And you? The son of a dead man and the target of a machine that doesn't forget." Jungkook clenched his jaw. "I want answers." Serafina raised an eyebrow. "Everyone here wants something. That's not what buys truth. What do you offer?" Taehyung placed the Icarus drive on the table between them. The original files. Not decrypted yet. You help us trace them. Confirm what's real, we give you access. She studied them, then reached out with gloved fingers, tapping the drive once like it might bite. Her expression shifted. You know what this is, don't you? She asked. You know that opening it is like lighting a signal fire on top of a warhead. That's why we need your help, Taehyung said. She looked at Jungkook again, more carefully this time. Not just at his face, but at something beneath it. You have no idea what he sacrificed for you, do you? Jungkook flinched. Who? Your father, she said. He erased an entire generation of data to keep you hidden, burned the names of 50 agents, shut down 3 covert labs, and disappeared before they could do the same to you. The moment you came looking, all of it started ticking again. Jungkook leaned forward. Then tell me how to stop it. She smiled, not unkindly. You can't. But you can choose where the fire falls. She stood, took the drive, and motioned for them to follow her. They moved through the back corridors of the cathedral, down into what had once been a crypt but was now a vault of knowledge, forbidden in any official channel. Screens lined the walls. Hard drives hummed like bees in a hive. A terminal waited at the center.
Serafina plugged in the drive. The screen flickered, then burst open with data, files upon files cascading into view, organized by dates, names, bloodlines, and code phrases. Jungkook saw his own image flash across the screen, marked Siren 42, Active Shadow. Next to it, a still image of his father, marked Erased Pending Legacy Breach. Serafina's fingers moved like a pianist, isolating one folder labeled The Lullaby Directive. You want to know what Siren really was? She asked. Jungkook nodded. She opened the file. A video played, grainy, low resolution. A child, maybe 5, strapped to a chair, electrodes on his temples. A woman sang in the background, soft and repetitive like a nursery rhyme. As the lullaby played, the child's eyes fluttered, then widened, then began to glow faintly. Jungkook recoiled. What is this? They weren't just embedding memories, Serafina said. They were embedding responses, triggers, conditioning the brain to react violently or perfectly depending on the song, the phrase, the sensory input. It's mind control, Jungkook whispered. Taehyung's face had gone pale. How many? Over 100 globally, she said. Only a few survived. You're one of them. Jungkook's pulse roared in his ears. Deactivate it, he said. Serafina blinked. What? This program, the conditioning, the legacy tracking, I want it out of me. Whatever they did, I want it gone. Serafina gave a slow, sad shake of her head. That's not how it works. This isn't a code you delete. It's written into who you are. Your neural pathways, your reflexes, your instincts. You can't erase it. But... She trailed off. But what? Taehyung pressed. You can overwrite it, she said. Recode the triggers. Replace the response with something else. It's dangerous, risky, but if done correctly, you can nullify the legacy protocol. Show us how, Jungkook said without hesitation. Serafina looked at both of them, then sighed. Then we need to go somewhere darker, somewhere no one can hear what comes next. As they prepared to leave the veil, Jungkook felt something shift inside him, not quite peace, but purpose. And for the first time, it didn't feel like he was running from something. He was walking straight into the storm. With his name, his fire, and someone beside him who had once kept the truth hidden. To protect the boy, who was now ready. To burn the lie down. The private plane that Serafina arranged for them took off under the cover of night, its departure unregistered, its flight path buried under layers of diplomatic clearance and artificial weather reports. Jungkook sat by the window, his face lit dimly by the soft glow of the moon outside, yet his thoughts were a violent sea, chaotic, thunderous, and hungry for the truth he had been denied for so long. Each mile away from New York felt like a thread unraveling inside him, a veil being pulled away from a life he had once believed was his own. Taehyung sat across from him, elbows on the table between them, eyes closed. Not sleeping, but thinking. Always thinking. The hum of the engines filled the silence between them, but even that felt distant, like they were suspended not in the air but in time itself, two souls drifting between who they were and who they were becoming. The location Serafina had chosen was in Iceland. A decommissioned NATO listening station turned into a private lab, nestled within the ice-capped wilderness where the northern lights danced like spectral guardians across the sky. According to her, it was the only place where electromagnetic interference was strong enough to block any surveillance, vault or otherwise. The irony wasn't lost on Jungkook. To erase what had been done to him, he would have to go somewhere built to listen. They landed at a discreet strip on the southern coast. The cold hit them instantly as they stepped out onto the frozen tarmac, sharp as knives, yet clean and untouched. A convoy waited, unmarked jeeps with dark windows and drivers who didn't speak. The journey inland took hours, winding through white silence, until finally a gray spire rose from the horizon, cutting into the sky like a blade. Inside the facility, it smelled of frost, metal, and old secrets. The walls were lined with equipment decades out of date, humming faintly with stored memory. Serafina led them through a labyrinth of corridors until they reached the chamber, circular, windowless, with a single chair at the center surrounded by an arc of light projectors and biometric readers. "This is the null loop," she said, gesturing to the setup. "It was originally built for sensory realignment therapy. We're going to use it for something much more dangerous." Jungkook stepped forward, drawn to the chair like gravity had claimed him. "What happens if it fails?" he asked. Serafina looked at him with a strange sadness. "If it fails, you won't die, you'll forget." Taehyung's breath caught. "Forget what?" "Everything connected to the trigger architecture," she said. "Memories, instincts, identity overlays. You'll wake up with no recollection of who you are or were, not even your name." Jungkook didn't hesitate. "I'll risk it." Taehyung reached for his arm. "Kook." But Jungkook turned to him, eyes steadier than they had ever been. "If I don't try, I'll always be theirs. I won't let them keep that part of me." Taehyung's hand dropped slowly. He gave a single, weighted nod. Serafina motioned to the technicians. They powered up the projectors, which began to pulse with low-frequency light, syncing with Jungkook's heart rate, his breath, his thoughts. Electrodes were attached to his temples, his wrists, his spine. The chair tilted back until he was staring directly into the dome above, which began to fill with shifting fractals of color and sound. "Begin phase 1, Serafina ordered. The chamber darkened. Suddenly, Jungkook wasn't in the chair anymore. He was in a corridor made of glass, suspended above an ocean that boiled with black waves. His reflection followed him in the walls, childhood versions, teenage versions, stages of him he thought he had left behind. A lullaby echoed through the air, soft and distorted, pulling him toward a door at the far end of the hall. He reached for it. It dissolved beneath his hand. On the other side, he found himself in a memory, not one he recognized, but one that felt intimate, like a scar long faded. A laboratory, cold, stark. A man in a white coat, his father, was arguing with someone off-screen. Jungkook tried to speak, but no sound came out. He tried to move, but his body wasn't his own. Suddenly, the man turned to face him. Not the young man from the videos, but the broken version, the one from the message. His eyes locked onto Jungkook, and for a moment the dream broke. Their gazes touched across time, across memory. "Remember what you are, not what they made you." Then everything shattered. A violent pull yanked Jungkook into a different scene, darker now, a room filled with surgical lights and screaming. His body jerked in the real world, heart rate spiking. Taehyung stepped forward from the observation room, fists clenched. "Is this normal?" he demanded. "No," Serafina whispered. Inside the null loop, Jungkook was reliving every moment the siren protocol had embedded into him, every artificial reaction, every time his body moved before he thought, every time his instincts weren't his own. It was all crashing over him like a flood, threatening to drown him. He saw himself in combat he never remembered training for, speaking languages he didn't know, smiling at people he didn't recognize, saying things he had never meant. He screamed. The chamber lights flickered violently. "Pull him out," Taehyung shouted. "We can't," Serafina snapped. "He's already past the threshold." Inside, Jungkook fell to his knees in the fractured dreamscape, blood pouring from his ears, though there was no pain, just clarity, and then quiet. He stood alone, in a white room with nothing but a mirror in front of him. When he looked into it, he saw not himself but his father. Then the mirror cracked, and everything stopped. In the real world, Jungkook's body went limp. The machines flatlined for a breathless second. Then pulse returned, strong, steady. The lights dimmed, the chair lifted. Taehyung rushed in, kneeling beside him, shaking his shoulders. Jungkook, talk to me." Jungkook's eyes fluttered open. He looked up at Taehyung and smiled. "Hi," he said, "you're real." Taehyung let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding, gripping his shoulder. Serafina stepped into the room. "What do you remember?" Jungkook sat up slowly. "Everything, but it's like someone else's dream, like a book I read a long time ago." "Do you feel any trigger responses?" Jungkook paused, closed his eyes, and whispered the lullaby, the one from the recording, the one that used to send fire through his veins. Nothing happened. He opened his eyes. "It's gone." Taehyung helped him to his feet. Outside, the storm had begun to pick up. Snow whipped across the windows in howling spirals. Serafina looked at the two of them, her expression grim. "We've severed the leash," she said, "but now they'll come to break the chain." Jungkook tilted his head. "Then we finish this." "Finish how?" Taehyung asked. "We can't fight them head-on." "No," Jungkook said, "but we can make them visible. That's what they fear most, exposure." He turned to Serafina. "Do you still have contacts in the free press?" She smiled faintly. "I know a few ghosts who still remember how to scream." "Then let's show the world what's been hidden." Taehyung placed a hand on Jungkook's back. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" Jungkook nodded. "I was born ready. They just tried to erase it." The three of them began planning, the names, the files, the methods of dissemination. A storm raged outside the station, but inside something stronger had been born. Not a weapon, not a puppet, but a witness. A fire set free. The wind howled louder that night, a primal, bone-deep cry that echoed through the ice-bound corridors of the decommissioned station. Every crack in the walls seemed to whisper, as if the facility itself knew something irreversible had just happened. The null loop was quiet now. Its lights dimmed, its machinery humming in a lower register, like a beast sleeping after a violent storm. But Jungkook was awake, more awake than he had ever been. He stood alone in the observation room, the projection monitors around him still flickering with fragments of neural data, but his attention was fixed on the wall-length window overlooking the Arctic plains. Snow cut sideways through the night like a shroud torn by fury. Somewhere beyond it, the world was still turning, blind and unaware. But here, something had shifted in the axis of things. A silent war had begun. Behind him, Taehyung entered quietly, the weight of sleeplessness and days of tension pressing into the elegant slope of his shoulders. He carried 2 mugs of something warm, though the steam curled into the cold air like smoke from a ritual. "I thought you might want this," he said. Jungkook didn't turn around at first, only nodded and took the cup when Taehyung offered it. The ceramic was hot against his palms, grounding him. He brought it to his lips but didn't drink. "I saw everything," he murmured, "all of it, what they did, what they planned." Taehyung stood beside him in silence. The room didn't need more words, but Jungkook wasn't finished. "There were others," he said. "Children, some older than me, some younger. I don't think they made it out." Taehyung closed his eyes. "That's what we're going to stop. You said it yourself. We burn it down." Jungkook turned now, facing him fully. You've always known more than you said. Even before New York, before the alley in Chicago, you knew about this. Taehyung didn't flinch. I did. Why didn't you tell me earlier? The pause that followed was long and deep, like something sacred was being dug out of the earth. Because I needed you to want to know, not just hear it. I needed you to feel it, to be ready. If I'd told you before, it wouldn't have changed you. It would have crushed you. Jungkook studied him, the sharp lines of his face carved deeper by truth. And now? Now, Taehyung said, you're fire, they can't crush fire. Outside, the wind screamed louder. In the control room below, Serafina was pulling up satellite overlays, aligning coordinates with decrypted blacksite reports. Dozens of facilities dotted the screen, abandoned research stations, offshore labs, ghost compounds hidden in the seams of political borders. The vault's reach was deeper than even she had imagined. We don't have time for a traditional release, she told them when they joined her. They'll trace a press leak in minutes, shut it down before it spreads. We're not going traditional, Jungkook said. Serafina raised an eyebrow. Then how? Taehyung answered. We seed it into every performance, every live stream, every global screen we can touch. His face, his story, the buried files, bit by bit. We turn their own obsession against them. You want to weaponize your fame, she said, slowly understanding. Not fame, Jungkook said, visibility. Serafina leaned back in her chair. That'll work, but only if the world believes what they're seeing. They will, Taehyung said, because they'll hear it in his voice. The plan took days to execute. Quiet calls to anonymous coders, artists, truth brokers, people Serafina had buried in every continent. A decentralized movement of digital phantoms, willing to plant the seeds of truth like sacred fire. The files were broken into fragments, each one tagged with unique markers that would only make sense when viewed through the lens of a larger narrative. A new identity was built for Jungkook, not to replace him but to cloak the weight of what he carried. The world would still see him on stage, in videos, in public, but the eyes watching from the shadows would begin to see something else. A pattern, a code, a confession. In the dead of night, inside a hollowed-out recording room buried beneath the ice, Jungkook stood before a microphone. His voice was calm, steady, honest. If you're watching this, it means something inside you knows what's wrong. You feel it, you see it. You just haven't found the words yet, so let me lend you mine. The monologue was woven into a performance, its rhythm embedded in a song that would premiere not on any official platform, but through a burst transmission across forgotten radio towers, pirated frequencies, encrypted channels disguised as late-night music shows. By the time the sun rose over Europe, the first video had been seen by millions. By noon, it had been flagged and removed in most countries. By nightfall, copies were everywhere. A storm broke across the internet, forums lit up, conspiracy boards exploded, fans argued, defenders clashed with skeptics, governments denied involvement, but the images kept spreading. The documents, the testimonies, the broken children with the lullabies in their veins. And behind it all, Jungkook's voice, soft but unyielding like a match burning beneath the tongue. They knew retaliation would come quickly. It did. The facility was hit 2 days later. It started with the satellite blackout. Then the comms went dead. Then the silence. Serafina was the first to notice it wasn't just a storm, it was jamming. A suppression field, military grade. They were cutting off all signals, isolating them. We need to move, she said, already packing up hard drives. Taehyung grabbed the encrypted briefcases and stuffed them into the escape duffel. Jungkook helped, calm despite the spike of adrenaline in his blood. How long do we have? He asked. Minutes, Serafina said. The lights flickered. A low rumble passed through the floor like something massive had just touched the earth outside. They're here. They didn't run. They burned the data. Everything but the core. They set charges in the lower tunnels and took the northern passage, using a snowcat pre-rigged for emergencies. As the facility collapsed behind them in a roar of fire and ash, Jungkook looked back only once, not with regret, but with finality. "We'll never come back here," he said. Taehyung pressed the throttle harder. "No, but what we did here will follow them forever." They didn't stop until they reached the coast, where an old contact of Serafina's waited with a cargo vessel bound for an undisclosed port. They boarded under aliases, slipped into the ship like ghosts. The seas were rough, the journey longer than expected. But as the world above them reeled in chaos, as governments scrambled to respond to leaks they couldn't plug, as agents defected and black sites were torched by unknown hands, Jungkook sat below deck, watching the files again. Not because he doubted them, but because he needed to remember. The faces, the names, the silence. Taehyung sat beside him one night, the low creak of the ship the only sound between them. He reached into his coat and pulled out something Jungkook hadn't seen before, a small pendant, metal, shaped like a broken star. "This was your father," he said. "He gave it to me the last time I saw him, told me to give it to you if I ever found the courage." Jungkook took it in his hands. It was cold, heavy, real. "I used to think I was just running from something," he said quietly. "Now I know I was running toward this." Taehyung didn't respond. He didn't need to. In the weeks that followed, the vault collapsed from within. Their secrets were no longer hidden, their power no longer absolute. Not because Jungkook had destroyed them outright, but because he had taken away their weapon of silence. He had shown the world what it refused to see. And the world had listened. Not all of it, not all at once, but enough. Enough to make sure it never happened again. They never returned to Seoul, never returned to the old lives they had once lived, but they weren't gone. They were everywhere. In the voices that rose in protest, in the children now protected, in the echoes of a lullaby rewritten not to control, but to heal. Jungkook no longer needed to know who he had been. He knew who he was now. The dock was silent when the cargo vessel arrived. They stepped onto foreign soil as phantoms, undocumented and unseen, their presence masked behind a fog of forged identities and hacked immigration records. Jungkook's boots hit the cracked concrete of the harbor as seagulls wheeled above the jagged skyline of an unnamed city, a forgotten port carved out of Southeast Asia, where wires draped between buildings like spiderwebs and diesel smoke hung low in the air. The city pulsed with a rhythm that didn't follow clocks. Everything moved in stutters, in transactions unspoken, in sidelong glances and the ever-present watch of invisible eyes. Serafina led them down narrow alleyways where markets buzzed at midnight and lanterns swung overhead, casting flickering halos over faces who had long learned how to vanish. They made contact with someone she referred to only as Leto, a former vault archivist who had defected years prior and vanished into the chaos of borderless cities. Leto was waiting inside an old gambling den converted into a bookshop, where dust and danger settled over old pages like sediment from an ancient war. Leto didn't look like a man who once held secrets that could sink governments. He was short, built like a spider, with thin fingers that danced constantly over chess pieces even when he wasn't playing. He wore gloves that didn't match and glasses he never looked through. He greeted them without a word, only nodding as he turned and walked through a curtain of beads that chimed like wind in a prison yard. Inside his backroom was a map stretched across 3 walls, not one of countries but of patterns, lines connecting symbols, names, satellite data, flagged offshore transfers, biometric signatures. Jungkook stepped into the room and felt like he was entering another layer of the vault, not the one they had exposed, but the one buried beneath even that, the one shaped like a whisper and hidden beneath the floorboards of reality. "You started a collapse," Leto said finally. His voice was delicate, deliberate, but not all pillars fell. some bent, some mutated. You exposed the mainframe, but the fragments went feral. Jungkook stepped closer. Fragments. Cells, Leto said. Pieces of the vault that no longer answer to any command. They act independently now, violently, without oversight. They're like rogue antibodies. What are they doing? Trying to rewrite the world again, this time with even less accountability. No chain of command, just chaos wearing a suit. Jungkook looked at Taehyung, then back at Leto. Can they be stopped? Leto tapped the chessboard beside him. Not stopped, redirected. You have to play the end game, and to do that, you need to understand the full scope of the siren architecture. Taehyung crossed his arms. We already burned it. You burned the framework, Leto said, but the source, the true sequence is still alive, buried in the original server, the root cell. Serafina's voice was taut. That was a myth. No, Leto said, eyes gleaming. It was a mirror. He stepped aside, pulling down a cloth that revealed an old terminal, pre-digital analog, still running off a battery backup system from the 1980s. The screen blinked amber. Lines of code scrolled in a rhythm that looked almost biological. This, Leto said, is a ghost image of the root cell. It's been feeding off dark servers for decades. Every siren file, every subject, every failed experiment, it's all indexed here. But it's locked by 3 keys. One of them, he turned to Jungkook, is your DNA. Jungkook stiffened, and the others. One belongs to a woman known as the Architect. She designed the psychological models used in the siren protocol, and the last belongs to a man whose code name was Spectre. Serafina swore under her breath. What? Jungkook asked. Taehyung looked haunted. Spectre was the cleanup, Serafina said. He's the one they sent to erase failures, burn black sites, eliminate loose ends if he's still alive. He won't cooperate, Leto finished. Then we make him, Jungkook said. No one ever found him, Serafina said. No one who lived anyway. Jungkook looked at the terminal. Then we find the Architect first. It took 3 weeks to triangulate her location. She had gone underground years ago, retreating into a web of false identities and shell corporations. But her movements betrayed her. A pattern emerged in the data. Art auctions in untraceable galleries, anonymous publications in fringe journals, encrypted fund transfers that pulsed around a specific region in northern Italy. Florence. They landed quietly, slipping into the city's veins like ghosts. By day, the streets were alive with tourists and street musicians, with lovers and thieves and artists who believed they were the first to see beauty. But by night, Florence belonged to the forgotten, dealers of relics that should never have been found, traders of truths best left unspoken. They found her in an abandoned villa, cloaked in ivy and silence. The Architect, real name Dr. Elira Voss, was older now, gaunt and sharp, wrapped in layers of silk and sorrow. Her eyes were mismatched, one violet, one glass. She greeted them with a pistol. Get off my land. We're not here to hurt you, Jungkook said, raising his hands. That's exactly what Spectre said, she replied. Taehyung stepped forward slowly. We're here to end the program, not revive it. You can't end what you are, she said, eyes locked on Jungkook. You are the last living iteration of Siren. You are its echo. I'm not a weapon, Jungkook said. Then stop acting like one, she snapped. Something in that quieted him, her hand lowered. She led them inside where the villa had become a museum of nightmares. Files, sketches, tapes, whole drawers filled with the architecture of control, and in the center of it all a small device the size of a palm, black, unassuming. My key, she said. Jungkook stepped forward. Why help us? She stared at him a long time. Because you're not the first one to come looking, but you are the only one who didn't ask how to use it, only how to end it. They left Florence with the second key. And a warning. Spectre, she said before they departed, wasn't just the vault's eraser. He was its first subject. Siren Zero, the original prototype. Everything you are, he is more. And he doesn't want to be found. They didn't find him. He found them. 3 days after they arrived in Marrakesh, he walked into their safe house like smoke. Jungkook had just returned from a satellite upload. Fragments of the root cell decoded and spread to nodes waiting to reconstruct the architecture. Taehyung was patching new encryption into the tracking systems. Serafina was on watch. The door opened, and he was there. Dressed in black, face partially scarred, eyes empty of anything but calculation. "Hello, Jungkook," he said. They drew weapons, but he didn't flinch. "I'm not here to kill you," he said. "Not yet." "What do you want?" Jungkook asked. "To see if you're worthy," Spectre said. Then he moved. Faster than sound. The room exploded into chaos, blades drawn, fists landing, the air charged with the precision of two minds built from the same architecture, same training, same buried command lines. Jungkook fought without thinking, without reacting. Instinct met instinct, until instinct broke. Spectre had him against the wall, blade at his throat. "You think you're free," he whispered, "but you've only severed the leash. The collar is still there." Jungkook spat blood, "Then take it off." Spectre hesitated. "Then let go." He stepped back. "Give me the other keys," Jungkook said. Spectre looked at him and laughed softly, sadly. "You think the vault was the monster," he said, "but the monster is silence. You gave it a name, that's why I'll help you." He handed over a chip. The third key. Within days, they had all three. Back at Leto, the root cell unlocked. And the world tilted. Inside were records never meant to exist, experiments on children under false names, alliances between nations that had sworn opposition, deals made in blood and silence. The Siren Protocol wasn't just about control. It was about rewriting memory, whole histories, cultures, leaders whose pasts had been altered. Mass events never recorded. Taehyung looked pale. "It's not just about us, it never was." "No," Serafina said. "This was always about power. Control the past and you control the future." Jungkook stood before the terminal. He could destroy it. Or he could show it. He looked at the others. Then pressed the final command. The root cell went live. And the world burned with truth. The world did not end with sirens and fire when the root cell went live. It ended in silence first, in a flicker. A blink. The hum of a million screens shifted, imperceptibly at first, then all at once. Files, documents, blurry footage with no origin but undeniable resonance, truths wrapped in horror, records scrubbed clean but never gone, began to pulse through every dark corner of the internet. University servers, museum archives, forgotten blog spots, VPN-encrypted drive folders, torrent libraries, whisper networks on forums that had no language, only codes. A ghost net lit up like constellations once invisible, now glaring with revelation. And behind them all, a name that once meant only a voice. Jungkook. The leak was never meant to be elegant. It was never meant to convince the world in one breath. It was meant to fracture everything, to splinter certainty, to force questions where there had been blind faith. The root cell files were raw and unfiltered, stream of consciousness logs from dying agents, medical scans of neural scars that couldn't be fabricated, transcripts of meetings with no time stamps, no locations, only voices that sounded like power made flesh. They called it the dissonance. Newscasters broke into live segments with shaking voices, trying to read words no one had ever meant to hear. Politicians vanished for hours, then days. The heads of multiple private military conglomerates were found dead within a 72-hour radius, plane crashes, heart attacks, self-inflicted wounds that didn't look self-inflicted. Stock markets froze, then surged, then fell like stars over a ruined skyline. Governments issued statements that contradicted themselves within hours. Social media collapsed under the weight of disbelief. And still, the uploads didn't stop. Each file bore the same embedded watermark, unseen, unmade, now remembered. Jungkook watched it unfold not from a bunker or safe house, but from the rooftop of a crumbling hotel in Lisbon. The sky above him was vast and uncaring, 1,000 shades of deepening twilight, and below it, the city moved like a sleeping god, unaware that it had just been made part of history. He didn't feel triumph. He felt a quiet ache, as if something sacred had been torn open and laid bare. Taehyung stood beside him, his coat unbuttoned, hair tousled by sea wind. He had always looked timeless in moments like this, like someone who could carry empires in his silence. He held a phone in one hand, muted. Notifications stacked endlessly, unread. "They're calling you the chosen heir," he said, his voice low. Jungkook snorted faintly. "Not the worst nickname. They don't know what to do with you. You're too real to dismiss, too unreal to categorize." "Good," Jungkook replied. "Let them sit in that discomfort." Taehyung turned to look at him fully then. "You know it's not over." "I know. There are people," he continued, "who will want the vault back, not as it was but reborn. They'll see the chaos as opportunity, try to rebuild it under another name." "They'll fail," Jungkook said. Taehyung narrowed his eyes. "Why?" Jungkook turned toward him, his face steady. "Because I'm still here." Later that night, in a room lit only by the flickering images from a dozen open laptops, Serafina sat on the floor with her knees pulled to her chest. She was staring at a single file, one she hadn't shared with the others. A file marked SCRAPHINA KAI 99. It was her. As a child. Hooked up to the same machine she had designed, her eyes unfocused, a number tattooed faintly behind her ear. She stared at herself like she was a ghost long dead. And then she deleted the file. Some memories, she thought, were no longer chains, they were ashes. Elsewhere, Leto had disappeared. His last message was a chessboard diagram with one phrase encrypted across the black squares. "Let the king walk alone." No one could find him after that, no one tried. Spectre remained in the wind, sending fragments of intel from cities that blurred into shadows. He never asked for thanks. He never signed his name. But every time a black site was exposed or a siren iteration file surfaced, the world suspected him. Or feared him. And that was enough. In the months that followed, Jungkook stepped away from music. Not entirely. His voice still bled through remixes and distant collaborations, songs that sounded like echoes in a cathedral, like memory half remembered. But he no longer stood in front of crowds. He no longer smiled for cameras. Instead, he listened. To the people reaching out across continents, across digital ruins, survivors of the program, ghosts who remembered enough to fear sleep, names once buried that now fought their way into light. They came in trickles, then floods, and Jungkook sat with every one of them, spoke when he could, cried when he couldn't, and sometimes only listened. He started something quietly, a foundation with no name, only a symbol, a broken star with 3 points, one for the lost, one for the freed, one for those still searching. The world spun on. New wars began. Old ones resurfaced. But there was now a crack in the mask, and light poured through. Years passed. One winter night, Taehyung found Jungkook in a monastery in the Swiss Alps. No cameras, no security, just candlelight and silence. He had grown his hair long. His arms were inked with symbols Taehyung couldn't read but recognized by shape, memories made skin. "You always did vanish dramatically," Taehyung said. Jungkook smiled, slow and warm. "You always find me." Taehyung sat beside him. "The last of the vault servers were destroyed last week," he said. "Leto sent the photos. He left one intact. in case someone ever needs to remember. They will, Jungkook replied. Not now, but someday. Taehyung was quiet. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out an envelope. This came to my old address in Seoul. No return mark, just your father's crest. Jungkook stared at it for a long time before taking it. Inside was a single photo. A boy, maybe 7, staring at a mirror, but in the reflection stood a man who looked almost exactly like Jungkook. And beneath it a note. He's awake and he remembers you. Taehyung watched the emotions pass through his friend like wind across still water. Do you want to find him? He asked. Jungkook folded the photo slowly, tucked it into his coat. I think, he said, rising, it's time the world met its echo. They left the monastery together. 2 men once made weapons, now walking like fire. And somewhere in the world, a child who dreamed in codes had just begun to hum a song he had never learned, and yet, somehow, knew by heart.